So my name is Aape Pohjavirta, and I'm an A-class ape. Normal ape doesn't talk. An A-class ape talks a lot. Uh, I define myself in the English language with four S's: simple, slow, stubborn, and stupid. And I am an ecosystem guy. I started my first company in 1988 when I was 20 years old and have been venturing ever since. Together, back in the early days, one of his biggest things was like, he actually truly believed in others. And he had this management style of actually trusting people. He was like, I don't know how to do this. You do it, and then you just and you just you could do it. You were supposed to do it, not go to him and you're not do it. And I think that this is another weird thing about founders is that they always think that they're going to be more clever than the previous generation. And I
Mm.
believe that the generative AI is gonna it will have a huge impact on the old ICT revolution based startups. Because when I started my career, like working at Brosco Systems in the early 1990s, developing one software application took years for multiple people, and it cost millions of Finmarks. That's hundreds of thousands of euros because everything was slow and cumbersome and blah blah blah. Nowadays, you can create it in a hackathon in just a couple of hours using these generative AI tools.
I mean, both Timo and Yuri have explained their version. You have Kristo Avaska explain his version of like how do we get to the next wave? How do we make the Finland stuff? Then the other part of like amazing, great new ideas that we can build, and then my reaction should be yes, up, let's build that. I don't know what that is, but
Yes, yes, yes.
hello, audience. I'm Nikki, host of Just Thoughts, and with me today, I have Aape Pohjavirta, and I think we haven't had a long discussion ever before. We see each other, we say hi, and we have our own handshake now, but we've never actually sat down to have a really long discussion about any specific topic. So I'm super looking forward to this and happy to share this with an audience as well. I picked a quote, and one of the reasons I'm looking forward to this, I picked a quote from your LinkedIn page about your speaker abilities. And somebody has said about you, I think it's a precondition for a good speech to keep the listener awake and present. And there are too many talking heads, as in, you are not a talking head, and talking to you will keep me awake and present.
Thank you, Nikki. Yes, yes, thank you. Uh, so my name is Aape Pohjavirta, and I'm an A-class ape. Normal ape doesn't talk. An A-class ape talks a lot. Uh, I define myself in the English language with four S's: simple, slow, stubborn, and stupid. And I am an ecosystem guy. I started my first company in 1988 when I was 20 years old and have been venturing ever since. I have a broad and long experience in doing weird things being I am a firm believer of the future being shaped by us. And if we don't actively shape our own futures, we will be living somebody else's future. And
Mm.
that's kind of a fundamental component in anything and everything I do. And yes, no, Nikki, we've sessions. I look forward to.
Yes. So 1988, I remember I joined the so-called ecosystem in 2014, and you had already been around for a long time at that point. Um, can you say something about like how you feel like shaping the future? Like when did you realize you need to shape your own future? I think that's like a high level thing I want to ask you. And then I want to go into like what was different then and what is better now.
This goes back a long way, but uh, my first job was when I was still in high school in a local ski and surf shop, Ski Systems, that was actually run by a guy who was one of the most talented ski jumpers in the 1970s. And then he fell in Planitcha and he lost the ability to walk. And regardless of that, so he was put into a wheelchair because of the accident, and he lost pretty much everything. He was like he was really good, an upcoming
Mm.
star. And then, regardless of that, despite of that, he brought alpine skiing to Finland. He brought windsurfing to Finland. He's brought mountain bikes, skateboards, name it, and snowboarding. And we had a good relationship with him, and he kind of showed me that regardless of what happens, it's you who creates your life. And that's kind of so it's all thanks to the way I was brought up as a young guy.
That sounds like an amazing first job or like first experience and a great mentor. Where is the guy now? Is he still doing the same things? Sounds like a
Uh,
Patagonia founder.
Pekka Salo he quite recently passed away, so he is not
Oh,
among.
sorry to hear.
Uh, his spirit lives on.
In you, and you take
Eh,
at least with that that sentiment. So what is different now? Like when you get into the startup scene, that you were doing this already like before there was a scene here in Finland, basically.
Yeah, I've always, because of the way I am, I've been dragged into places where nobody else has been. So there was a when I was the first one, so I was the first to get go and work abroad and then do these things and have a so-called global career, not anything fancy, but built out of the weird things that I was doing, and that thus I ended up in the when the wall in Germany, the Berlin Wall was coming down. I was involved in the creation of a startup ecosystem in Germany and Austria, and also involved with the people who were ousted from Apple Cupertino to Apple Europe. So I got to know a lot of weird people. And already in 1990, we were playing around with a concept called Telefinder. Telefinder was an online tool that enabled the Macintosh desktop to become part of a where distances are kind of it created a new layer, abstraction layer, user interface layer towards networked things. And I'm not a technical. I'm a I always remind people of the fact that I do have some technical understanding, but I'm not an engineer. But
Mm,
my bad eyesight, I see things that typically people do not see and do not dare to see. And that's kind of the dare to see is a key component in all what I do. The world was different back in the day. Digital was a transformative thing. And it was kind of
mm,
formative. So that what we saw with the emergence of the Macintosh and then with the graphical user interfaces and then the networked computers, we saw these digital things all of a sudden becoming more powerful than the closed systems that were industry or company specific, that were typically built in the mainframe environment. So the client server computing, then the emergence of the internet, then come the late 90s. I remember my so this is my world is consists of anecdote. So
yes.
so many anecdotes. I remember Artturi Tarjanne, one of the founders of one of the first venture capital companies, Nexit Ventures in Finland. It was 1990 something when I had an encounter with Artturi
Yeah.
when came the they bought via DRE a database into a solid database company, and that was in Kalle, the Charles 12th restaurant. And Arthur was like, "Oh, but we did it." And I was like, "What did you do?" And he said, "We bought." So yes, I have seen when I started working with these in this ecosystem, there was nothing, no structures, just people and a lot of promises and a lot of hard work ahead of us. And now that has become mainstream. And that's kind of, all of those radical things have now become mainstream and
Mm,
boring. The the radical event concept of slush that was kind of, the real founders of Slush were like, maybe someday this could become so even foreign investors would fly to Finland and invest and look at our Finnish companies. That has now transformed into something where Slush has become so big, it actually doesn't serve our local ecosystem anymore. It's become like an event, it's like so
mm,
that and all of this mainstreaming kind of makes me, it doesn't make me sad, but also simultaneously makes me, because I remain eternally curious. I'm like, so what's the next big thing? Because this is boring. We should have quit,
Yeah.
last 2018, whatever, and sort of like trying to do something that is impactful, but instead of doing this boring meh thing.
Yeah, well, I think everything becomes boring when you see it in enough times, right? Like when you're endlessly curious, you're like, if it seems familiar, it's like, I've been here, what can I learn? Where can I go to learn something new? And do you think that's like one of the reasons? I mean, you've started, in gone to different continents even to start building businesses, right?
That's a good question, Nikki. And no, actually, there's one thing that never has made me bored, and that's the human. It's the human being. That's us individual. I do as a hobby. One of my hobbies, I don't have many, is kind of being active in the ecosystem, coaching and training founders and early in there. Especially, I have created this method of how to simplify your story so that you actually, whatever you're building actually starts making sense.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens in that process of learning for in the founders is
Mm.
that they all of a sudden understand that I have this thing but I can't explain it. So it is a process where I get to encounter new people's new dreams every week. So last week I was like Jyväskylä, and over the years I've done this thing with thousands of people, right?
Mm.
Thousands of people. Every time it's like I get energized, I get vitalized, I get revitalized by this interaction of, there are humans and they have dreams and they have visions and they can't explain them, but they're born with it. And that component is eternally interesting, eternally curious, but it's also eternally interesting. So that's not, so you said that, is there something that becomes boring when you see,
Yeah.
longer periods of time? But encountering new individuals or even remaining, looking at curious individuals from next to them is that's interesting. That's cool. It's not about that, but it's somehow the people somehow have this fallacy of, let's create processes, let's create structures, let's have someone decide, and it's kind of that
Mm.
makes life boring, because then you look at the
Unpredictability has its appeal, if you will. I'm wondering, like, maybe it's also like how naive, like you get inspired by how naive some people are and how like relentlessly they think they can pursue their goals, and they don't, like, I get that a lot. Like I'm currently, like, my life got like up and down, right? So it's not only roses, and you've seen the most, and then you know how hard the hard times are, and you know how great the great times are. And then listening to the founders, I remember once hearing Miki, this was maybe 2019-20 in the sludge stage. He was like, yeah, if I knew how hard this was, I've never done it. And then I get energy from all of these new people who are like, yes, we can do this. And it's like, yes, that is the attitude. Like I remember being excited and then getting fueled for the excitement. And then when you go into these stale environments where there's processes, there's structures, there's whatever, the default answer is like, nah, let's think about it. And it's like,
yeah,
no, let's not think about it. Let's go and try and see what
yeah,
happens.
data, like the startup käsikirja, the startup manual, kind of
Yeah,
new, is tehdään vaan, just do it, kind of
yeah.
and yes, and in addition to what you said, it's like it's you have the black and the white simultaneously. They're both there, and the best example for this is when Slush was still at Kaakelitehdas. Uh,
Mhm.
there was this Slush event, and somebody was pitching, and I've been coaching them, and then the guy won, right?
Yeah.
And he's on the stage, and I'm like, yeah, you won. And then he's shouting in my face, I'm gonna get deported. And I was like, you won. That's, he's like, I'm gonna get deported. And then I was like, so you won, but you're gonna get deported. So we had to arrange. So I had to call the mayor of Espoo and to organize the process. I have to stay in Finland. So there's this continuous, when you are a founder and when you're building something that hasn't been built before, the good and the bad, the light and the shadow are ever present. And you have to learn to dance with them. And I think that you said, Nikki, last few years, I haven't had much encounters with Mickey, but from when we spent more time and work together back in the early days, one of his biggest things was like, he actually truly believed in others. And he had this management style of actually trusting people. He was like, I don't know how to do this. You do it. And then you could do it. You were supposed to do it, not go to him and you're not do it. And I think that this is another weird thing about founders is that they always think that they're going to be more clever than the previous generation. And I always, I look at them and I'm like, no, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be prepared to give your everything. And they're like, yeah, but I'm not going to give everything. I'm going to give 90%. And I'm like, no. If you want to succeed as a founder, you have to give your everything. And that means that if you have a wristwatch, that is expensive, you have to be prepared to actually put it in the game. Because if you don't put everything in the game, you're an early employee. You're not a real founder.
Yeah, I think there's two schools to this, right? So, firstly, I agree with you need to, like, when you commit to something, you need to do. I hate when people say, like, I'm going to try. It's like, if you try, you're already planning to fail. Like, don't try. Like, I always put the Yoda meme with, like, it's do or do not. There's no try. So either you do and succeed, and you do and you fail, but you don't try, right? So, like, that mentality. But then, like, putting everything into the game, I mean, you have also the counter examples of example like Linear and Karri, who actually deliberately did and incubated their startup idea on the side of their day job and then kind of build it out that way. So there's like, I wouldn't glorify the masochistic, let's like put everything in and put all the eggs in one basket. And then the other discussion I've been having with people is like, I think in Finland, you somehow, there's like, when it comes to like new ventures, there's like a bias for like, you need to be all in. Like you need to be like 100% working on this one thing. But if you look at the world and the most successful people, like they have a bunch of things they're doing, like a bunch of things. Like they have multiple projects, multiple side hustles. Like in the San Francisco, this is more normal. Like, but when you look at Elon Musk, nobody's asking if like, does it make sense for Elon Musk to have 7 companies? Or like how many companies he has, Nobody asked that because he's Elon, right? And I think that's like that's just simply an attitude question. So if you're doing something at any given time, I believe in like give 100% of the, like be present for that moment when you've allocated the time to do that one thing and do it 100% in that moment. But I wouldn't go and say like, you need to focus 100% on absolutely like one thing at any given time. Because that's kind of, we're not human. That always, I get the feeling that then we're putting people like in a box. Like you need to be in this one box. And then we are as humans, we are a lot, there's a lot more to us than just this one box you put them in. And then allowing this freedom. And then it's about, after that, I believe it's founding your narrative. Right? Like how does everything you do make sense in your narrative? I don't know, like challenge me on this thought. Like, does that make sense, or am I missing something?
You're not missing. I'm thinking of the example that you mentioned, Karri. I think that he's always been all in, but he has his own way of putting all in.
Yeah.
And I think that that's And I think that he's a very good example of someone who puts all in without endangering his existence. And that's kind of, but that's, I think that that has to do with the fact that he's been doing this for a long time. Remember, he was involved when this whole thing started,
Yeah.
that venture garage. Uh, And that means that there are different, let's say, hockey players. There's different people in the motorsports. There's a Max Verstappen, and then there's someone who is not Max Verstappen. There's a basketball player who's Lauri Markkanen, and there's someone who's not.
Yeah.
And and how do you? And that's, I think that is really important for the founder or for an early employee
Mm.
and themselves to know themselves. And this is something that we in our ecosystem need to focus on more and more, because the world is it's become woke, and it's become complex and it's always been complex and complicated. But it's the overly simplification of everything is not good. But simultaneously, the founder needs to oversimplify themselves, right? Yeah, it's a kind of, so it's a
Yeah.
juxtaposition. You are supposed to be 100 and 120% engaged in whatever you do, whether it's 24 by 7, or whether it's 996, or whatever the Porsche number is, 911, And yeah, because there's this anecdote, 996. So two Americans were just 996, and a German sat down at the table having lunch, and then the guys were like 996 and 996, and the guy was like, I don't like 996, I actually like 992. And they were like, really? And they were like, wow, are you a billionaire? What? He was like, no, 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 I really like 911s because Porsche 911 has this different kind of, 6 and
This is like
992.
taken out of context. This number means so many different things.
Exactly. But what I so you have to know yourself, and I think that we need the ecosystems globally would need to have better tools for the founders. We need to take better care of them. We need to give them, in our ecosystem, we have one individual who took his own life because of his dreams were so big, and he's not being talked about. And that's an example of where this open, transparent, beautiful, hardworking community where everyone shares and blah blah blah. Actually, those values are not present always. So I
Yeah.
think that's one of the big things that we got to do. We got to take better care of each other as individuals, as humans. That's kind of seeing us as humans thrive is more important than seeing us thrive as businesses. Period. That's more important. That's kind of,
Yeah, I think I think that's one that separates our ecosystem from many others, is that we come from a society that values individuals and like health, and there's like a certain type of thinking that there's more to life than success in numbers, if you will. I somehow feel that. And then we have failed, as you mentioned. There's a bunch of, I think you're referencing to Ian Sørensen, God
yeah,
bless his soul. But there's also like, I've heard, haven't met in person, but Aura's head designer, his brother has taken his life. Christian Ranta's brother, I
yeah,
believe, well. So there's a lot of individuals in our ecosystem who's been, close to this thing. Um, and I've always felt like going through the ecosystem, like the greatest value you get is to like the friends
yeah,
that you still like. I was yesterday at this YC night, listening to the ones of us who's been through like YC and what they get out of the community, and it's like the best part of it with listening to that is like, and you hear the pitches, you understand what the founder narrative and how founders should talk, and then ultimately I was listening to this. Well, I mean, there's a certain mentality and certain way you need to talk to get into these VCs and get your funding and deal with your stuff. But what I really valued the most in those moments is like, well, I see my friends again, who's been through some shit, and then we can laugh at all memories, and you've been through so many things with them that when you listen to them talk about their successes and their failures, you understand all of the pain that's gone into that.
Yeah.
And then you only need to say like one thing or like make one comment, and they get it. They get it where they're coming from, and like you start laughing like in a quiet room. Everybody was quiet, and then I had one of the guys said something. I started laughing because I know where it comes from, right? And this connection is something that
Yeah.
feels so incalculably human that I remember why I why I enjoyed hanging out with all these people, right? And then
Yeah.
the other part of especially these individuals is that they we have the privilege of actually being able to, when we are like, let's do it, we've actually been reinforced. We don't have as many barriers as some other people. So now later in life, I've done a lot of work with like people in the DEI scene, and people who face structural barriers, and then you understand your own privileges and where you come from. So like you feel so grateful that you've been around that you don't need to think about it, and you've been able to do all these amazing things. But coming back to like, I think this is what makes our human ecosystem unique, is that we actually do feel, we do care. And I think I listened to Sami Inkinen once. I think it was the podcast he did with Harry Stebbings. He mentioned he has a similar group in the States that he always turns to, where he can share all the troubles and blah blah. And that was not a accelerator program. That was something else. So I think if we look at all the best ecosystems in the world, there would be some sort of element of this there as well. Like people do take care of each other.
Yeah, that's true. I if I just taking two steps back and looking at where the world is and what should be done about it. I think that we have come to the end of the kind of the ICT transformative wave. So if there's was a wave of digital and an ICT, I think that we are now, that wave is getting closer to the shore, and soon it's just as well is going to be gone, and there's going to be something different. This is what we're now seeing with AI and these latest incarnations of new businesses is it's ICT, it's digital, like it's zeros and ones, and that's this is kind of I see AI as a user interface to digital. That's kind of how I see it. So it's like we have created digital infrastructure, whether it's mobile, blah blah blah. It is AI is nothing else than a user interface. It's more clever than Windows. It's better than the mouse. It's you in a couple of years you'll be able to talk to it. It organizes it,
Mm.
and that's it. And that's it. And now our ecosystems, we're at a point in time where 2008, 2009, Venture Cup was a foundation in Finland that Pekka Räunen and others had been promoting for software industry, blah blah blah, and that then became transformed into our startup ecosystem. So that was the next wave of entrepreneurship. I think that we need a similar transformation, and I don't see that transformation. I'll rephrase myself. There are signs of such transformation also in our ecosystem, but also globally, such as, the emergence of freight, Ernesti and Nantti and them.
Okay.
But it also means that, when waves collapse or break, the energy, the only thing that gets transformed to or transmitted to the next wave is the energy, the molecules themselves. So the old one is going to die. So all of this old that we have built is going to die. It's going to become as irrelevant as the previous old things are. Nobody remembers International Oracle Users Week in 1994, where, the fundamental were laid. Nobody remembers that except for the people who were there, right? So the things first slash whatever is going to become irrelevant. So what is the next big thing? And that's kind of what drives me. And that's interesting, And I believe that the generative AI is it will have a huge impact on the old ICT revolution based startups. Because when I started my career, like working at Brosco Systems in the early 1990s, developing one software application took years for multiple people, and it cost millions of Finmarks. That's hundreds of thousands of euros, because everything was slow and cumbersome and blah blah blah. Nowadays, you can create it in a hackathon in just a couple of hours using these generative AI tools. So the world is going to be so much faster and so much easier. It's going to be really hard and really difficult to know what works. But big transformation comes from science. And that link between science and research and students and companies and especially private capital, that is a field where a lot of big stuff is going to happen. We need things to, longevity, cancer, malaria, those time travel, whatever you want to do, kind of those big things, solving the big problems of humanity. That's not going to happen with AI. It needs fundamental structural changes. And that comes from, if we believe in science, then that comes from science. If we don't believe in science, then that must come from God. And I haven't seen a God yet. What do you think of this, Nick?
Whoa. Took like 2 steps back, and then you packaged a lot of things into a big ball and threw it at me. so
Yeah, good.
Thank you. Easy catch. Hold on. Okay, so firstly, I'm super happy when it comes to our ecosystem with Freight and what they're doing. I think it's the attitude we need, and there will always be a wave of a bit of complacency. So even within an ecosystem that builds, the ecosystem has waves, and there will always some people come and create a big wave like Nante and Ernesti are doing. And then there will likely be a phase when that energy gets transformed into something before the next wave comes, and there's people there in between. So not every cohort of the next teams always accomplish something as impactful as what Freight now is. And I think that is very natural. But I'm always worried of like, is it coming or not? Like yesterday, I had this discussion with Marko Voutilainen. It's like, okay, so like who will pick up the ball and be equally as ambitious, and it usually comes from a younger generation, because as we deemed earlier, they're so naive that they don't know. I feel that about myself. It's like I become, the older I get, I don't know if you feel this, but the older I get, the more cynical I get. And I think I have that in me, but there's kind of this, should I push on every single thing, where a young person is like, they push on every single thing and then they see what comes out of it. So a natural cycle, but I'm always worried about knowledge transfer. So when it comes to this ecosystem development, and I'll get to the other points you're talking about now, it's like I always show whenever I talk with the new people who get into like Aalto ES or whatever, I show them like a startup lifeline, like the arc of one startup. So you had like inception, and then you have in the other end, you have like it exiting or being the biggest company ever or whatever. And then each endeavor the ecosystem builds needs to go into this line, right? And as the ecosystem grows, it matures as a startup. So there's like a bubble forming around this lifeline, right? And then if you create a venture within this ecosystem that does not fit the startup lifeline or fit the bubble as in amplifying that, then it will die and it won't work. Because there's not enough like interest within the ecosystem to make it happen. And Freight is a great example of like, there's the bubble has grown, and now we can actually be at a point where we can get like MIT grade, like top of the line, hardest scientists to actually come here, and we can actually support them with our ecosystem, and we can teach them something. That could not have been possible when, Miki Kuusi started or like Christo started Aalto ES, because the community wasn't big enough. There wasn't enough learnings. There wasn't enough so this is putting a framework or a piece of thought. And before I answer your other questions of this big ball, I'd like to hear like your thought, because you're building now an ecosystem, or at least you're helping ecosystems be built through your new venture Dragon. And Dragon Guild.
Yeah. So good. So Dragon Guild is really simple. It hasn't, nobody's done it before, but it in the field of design thinking has been done. So design thinking it's a practical approach towards building anything. You go to users and you ask them, do you have a problem? And then you solve that problem. And while you're doing that, you then create a product that solves the problem. And then you create a business around that product. So design thinking makes life really easy. Venture thinking is a thought that we're introducing with Dragon Guild. That means that if there's an intention, there's an intent, or there's an invention, then private capital goes to that invention and intent and helps that grow and become life-changing, world-changing, multiverse-changing. And during that process, it then does, like design thinking does product building, we do company building. And Dragon Guild is the hypothesis is that learning and being skillful helps you in doing things that you don't know how to do. And that's why we're focusing on education of capital, that is private capital, family offices, LPs and GPs, people who do research or commercialize research, so researchers and university people, and then large companies, because they are important. They are one exit path. And then also the public sector. We do it on a European level. So this is going to be everybody talks about Europe. There's lots of talk about Europe. And then if you ask, what is the actual process where I can do something in Europe? None exists. Even the EU Inc. is a wonderful thing. You have people who with these baseball caps or whatever you call them, football caps or soccer caps. We're in Europe. So baseball caps with EU Inc. And I'm like, good, where is it? And so we are the first program. There's actually, we're building Europe faster than Europe. And there's Bengt Holmström and the guys, they have written this, the innovation, Constitution of Innovation. So Europe, I'm a proud European. I'm a global citizen. I'm a Finn. We Europeans, we have to become courageous again. We have to, instead of over-regulating ourselves, we need to do stuff. And that's what Dragon Guild is. We're doing that. Probability that it will succeed, probably it will fail. But going back to your thought, this is I want to throw you with a dart. This is not a ball. This is a dart, Nikki. Avoid it. When I started working in this, that was late 80s, early 90s. Finland we were world leaders in morphological, whatever language model development research. We had the world's leading neural network studies in Helsinki, technological, TKK at Aalto University. So we had the components, the research was there for us Finns to start developing these language-based models. And we even had, or MuSQL, the database, and we had, so we have also previously had all of the scientific, the hard tech components. Remember LampStack? The world was built on the internet. The internet was built on LampStack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. 50% of the components are Finnish. The modern application thinking that is kind of arose with the mobile application invented here in Finland by myself in 2003. So we've had these. So the one thing that we have been missing is the marketing and funding component of this. And luckily we should be able to show that. And I love the Lifeline guys. I love these VCs. They're building bigger funds, but we need more ambition. What we're missing actually out of Finland is we have had companies build world-class companies. I would like to see someone saying we're going to build the world's best VC. And I haven't heard that. So
I actually had a brief back and forth with Yuri and Timo about this, and they did an episode not too long ago on Startup Ministry about this specific VC topic. And the conclusion was it's like nobody has out innovated VC, or VC model has been tried. I don't understand enough about the mechanics of the different instruments. That's not my strong suit personally, but the conclusion was it's just the most efficient way of working to finding the most ambitious founders and then making bets on that. And when I've been an interesting person to follow, there's this guy called Henry Shih, who recently joined Anthropic, and he's trying to find the first billion-dollar solo company, which goes into this whole mega trend of things. So the assumption is what AI is going to do is when you learn and know how to leverage already the existing capabilities, you should be able to create a billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
Now, the
Yeah.
interesting alone, right? So, we need founders who believe it's possible. But in his search, what I found interesting, he has found these solo GPs who nobody knows about, who have like, I don't know, I don't know how many, billions in Aum. They have 0 people working for them. Like he has found at least 2 who have like made billions without employees, and they haven't leveraged AI at all. And they have
Yeah.
a very specific style of investing. They have a very specific thesis, and they have a very strong network. So when they surround themselves with the right people and invest in the right people, then they start, rolling in. So kind of on this anecdote, I don't know if it's like what you can do in like VC innovation. Personally, 2 years ago, I spent 4 months trying to think, how do you build something that is an organization or an institution that can be alive 10 years from now? Because the trend is everybody dies faster, but the
Yeah.
people remain. So you need to create some sort of community platform, and most like organically this happens a lot. Like when the right people gravitate towards you, you create some sort of community that lives either virtually or through events or whatever, people who get together and then they help each other build different ventures. And then one person ends up working with like 10 or 15 companies throughout their career, or starting like 5 or 10 companies, and some are successful, some are not. But like we need a systematic way of allowing this to happen, and then we need a strong enough but still loose structure around it to make it happen. And then there's like unique examples of this. There's some like 4 or 5 years ago, I read an article in HBR about a Chinese company where every team in the company is its own company, and the only rule it has, it limits itself to being only 12 people. And if you can't do it with 12 people, then it's a separate company, and it somehow allows the companies to die safely, and that talent to be like redistributed within the company to a new place. And I think this is like a thought or a model that are misunderstood. And I don't know if Sherilyn Shu, this Singapore girl, came and chatted with you during Slush. So she had an interesting observation where she was like, she interviewed like 50 people from our ecosystem. And she said that it's so refreshing that students get resources and they get to do stuff, but it still needs to come with some sort of accountability. Like you can't give people endless amount of money. And what was like good for Slush back in the day when I was there was like, you were afraid you were going to go bankrupt every year. Every year it was like it was do or fucking die. And then what's going to happen next year? I don't know, not die. And people don't
Yeah.
understand it, right? So when they get too much money or get too much help, so I think this is visible in Freight as well. It's like they have this like super big obstacle to overcome, and there's a lot of people with a lot of power who can solve this instantly, but there's a counter. It's like a delicate dance the people in the ecosystem also need to learn. Is like letting people fail, and then creating the structure of like how to still harness all of that learning back into something new so that we can build something else going forward. And I think like everyone that is coming up, the younger ones, they should like always lean forward and fail forward so you don't go back. So coming back to your dart question, like how do you build a VC that is, or like how do you out innovate VC or like create something that is more modern? I think the element of understanding what AI is actually doing to knowledge work is super critical. Nobody, and I've been doing now some work on this the past month because of reasons, like what are the actual skills that are super valuable in AI human teaming? And then how do you actually train and develop those? Like what are the skills that actually matter? And then the more I think about it, it just makes more sense, and the whole world is what like leaning into entrepreneurship. Like we need to learn how to create businesses, be okay with the fact that we won't be doing the same job, you know, over and over again. And we need to start leveraging like AI to actually create a business from scratch that might, you know, capitalize on revenue and value for 3 or 4 years. And then we need to rethink how we create some sort of, I don't know, institution or network or whatever that sustains some sort of cohesion, so that all of that learning gets like always distributed forward into something new, and then you can always build on the next wave, right? So to answer, like I don't know the mechanics of like what sort of like legal structure we're talking about here, but I do know something about like human systems and the trust and how to build those human systems so that you can leverage the previous knowledge of the previous. And I think like just documenting things like very concrete little thing that has not been done is like there's so many people with so many great stories in our ecosystem alone, and we can just like document all of that, put it in an AI, and that actually like, and then have people actually meet each other. We used to do like lottery lunches back in the day with the alumni and the actives, and that's how I personally know so many people. It's like there was a very simple donut date type of thing, and people actually committed to it. And when you understand how much value this creates, when it's like, yeah, I know this person, I could just call them, I was lunch with them, and you push them through it, like that has immense value. And that died away. All of that died away during COVID.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Good.
I think we've been going all over the place. I promised you 40 minutes. We've been talking for almost 50 now.
There's one thing that Mark Andreessen was so he's not stupid. He said in May, June this year, he said that the whole venture industry has to relearn to act from first principles, kind of, understand that that's kind of the trend of the solo GP thing. And that's back to early days of software industry. That's how, and I have friends, my mentor, the reason why I'm doing these things is Dan Cochran, who was the world's first technology evangelist at Apple. So that's kind of, and Dan and me, he's older now, but still. And back in the day, it was like that, somebody came up with something and went somewhere and said, hey, I don't have any money, how can we do this? Whether it's Kostler, whether it's, Vines, Banyan Vines, whether it's Steve Jobs, remember the Steves, Jobs and Wozniak, they had this capability, but they have no money. So they had to find this Mike Markkula guy. And that's kind of how Apple became a big thing. And that's where I believe that in this world of tomorrow, where new ideas, the contextualization of new ideas becomes localized because it's a local emergence of an idea, puff, and then it needs to be funded. That you can't go to the fund structure. We have the next, GP or LP meeting in 6 months. Let's wait, do this, do that. No, the decisions have to be almost instantaneous. So that there's a tremendous fund-based model might work somewhere, but it's not generic, and it is not supportive of the rapid kind of funding needs that you need. So that's
but that's been tried as well, like with Tiger Fund. Tiger Fund was shooting tickets, you have one call and you shoot a ticket, and now they're trying to do the same with Boardy. There's this new like AI runs the whole show and deploys the ticket instantly. I talked with a guy yesterday who's creating an on-chain solution for distributing cash like this. Like when the decision is made, the cash goes, I don't think I don't think like these are things that will reduce friction, but what still has like immense value is creating the right sort of networks. So coming back to the Henry Shee and the guy he's been interviewing for like solo GPs, is like knowledge density and like humans who know how to actually solve these problems, who built the intuition and a strong network there, really helps in getting out of, you know, the deep. And coming back to your question about Finland, where we had all of this, like we had it all, like you listed, like we should have been the leaders and blah blah. A, like we do not know how to sell things. It's like we don't know how to create the narratives that are needed for global scale. Secondly, I have not met, other than Morten Mikkos, I have not met these guys. And there again, there's a gap. It's like somebody built the pyramids and then we've forgotten how the fuck to do it. Right?
Yeah, but
that's like a knowledge. There's
I'm saying meh because, or a design thinker in me says yes and. Risto Siiva. I met Risto for the first time in 1980. I think it was 9 in Tapiola when he was doing training people to use Mac computers at Macit, right? Macit was a company that was started by Eero Teerikorpi, who is now still in Silicon Valley, right? So all of these people are there, but it's nobody self-promotes. And this is one of the things. I remember when Morten, I've known Morten for quite some time, and I remember a long time ago we had a discussion about how to. So we made a decision. I at least made a decision that I'm not going to promote myself. If somebody wants, my help in this ecosystem, they know how to reach me, and then they send me a message and say, Aape, can you do this? I'm like, I either say yes, I can, I can't, and then I look at my calendar and I say I can come, and that's it. So I make myself available to this ecosystem, and that I keep on doing it, because if I'm not going to do it, then who's going to do it, right? I'm not saying that I always say, but the biggest motivation for me to do that is to force people to avoid mistakes that I already have seen made. And trust me, I've done more mistakes than most families or most nations have made in my own life. So I know a lot of stuff people shouldn't do because it don't work. That means I push the ecosystem in a direction where they get to find their new novel mistakes. And then I stand together with them and look at, how do we do that? Like Ernest, Aape, we don't have this mansion. I'm like, oh, so what? Let's find another mansion. And they found.
Look, no, I think there's value in being there. So what I've found on this note is like, I don't think like just simply like saying that because we know it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that somebody else cannot make it work. This is the one thing that, all these will always do. What has value is somebody experienced coming in and saying, I will believe in you and I will spend time with you. And that's, that is like the one thing that actually matters, more than anything for that individual to actually believe and try. And then it's like help them make their own mistakes, and that delicate balance of like helping them make mistakes but then still learning, like not catastrophic mistakes, not self-harmful mistakes. And I think that is the most valuable thing you can do as a somebody who's been through, and not be the one who says like this is not impossible because I know the world has changed again. The rules are different. AI makes things different. It's like the person who can tell me and explain the world the way I see it in a very like explain the world completely different to the way I see it. That is what I want to hear. That's what I want to see. And then comes the curiosity. It's like, then you remember why you got into this thing in the first place. It's like, holy shit, yes, that is the way the world is now. And then being excited from that, and then that makes you think, and you go back, and then you're like, well, shit, maybe it was just the wrong timing,
Nikki, I back. Listen. I actually came up with a new business idea. Can I pitch it?
Okay.
It's a service. back in the day, there was a busy signal when you called someone and you knew that it was like, okay, the line is busy. I have to call again, right? Nikki is on the phone, right? Nowadays, with all these devices and all these connections that we have, there's no way for you to, click on a busy button that makes you appear busy to all, whether there's signals or WhatsApps or whatever. So my idea is to create a service called Busy that allows people to click on and say that they're busy, show everyone in the world that they're busy. It's a busy signal, and that means that they need to contact you again, that you can't get their message. I'm thinking of Truecaller, a company that was funded by OpenOcean. They had billions of users. We could actually do a combination of these things.
Okay.
Okay.
So like I don't I think this needs another lunch and a refreshed brain and an in-person discussion
Yes.
to answer all of the, because a lot of, like, you want to answer all of these questions, you want to have them, and then it's like there's been a point where you put a lot of thought into it, but in the moment it's not there, and then like Morten, like all of this Finland stuff. I mean, both Timo and Yuri have explained their version. You have Kristo Avaska explain his version of like, how do we get to the next wave? How do we make the Finland stuff? Then the other part of like amazing, great new ideas that we can build, and then my reaction should be, yes, Aape, let's build it. I don't know what that is. But
yes, exactly.
I don't get it yet, but let's build it. And can I wire the money? I wire now some resources for you so that you can get it done. And then you come back and explain it to me, like when you actually show, or then you just come back to me and say it didn't work and I have some extra money.
Yeah.
I have a new idea. But who should be in touch with you, Aape?
Those who think that these incremental innovations are not enough, those who have children already alive, who should, we're perfectly capable of leaving this planet and maintaining this planet.
Yeah.
We shouldn't force ourselves to travel to Mars. If people think that best way to do that is science, and and would believe that science, the mainstream for science is go through commercialization and use of private capital, call me, because Dragon Guild will change the way the world works. It's about funding things that don't exist yet, but in a right way, in a good way. Hey.
Amazing. I'll stop recording.